This episode is sponsored by Kinsta. Between juggling client meetings, managing your website, and keeping up with everyday tasks, who has the time to stress out about website security? Well, with Kinsta, the technical stuff is taken care of, so you can focus on what you do best. Kinsta provides managed hosting for WordPress, offering lightning-fast load times, top-tier security, and unmatched human-only customer support. Whether you're a business owner, web developer, or running a digital agency, Kinsta makes managing your website easy and efficient. Kinsta provides enterprise-grade security, being one of the few hosting providers for WordPress with SOC 2 and other certifications, guaranteeing the highest level of security for your website. Thanks to their unlimited free expert-led migrations, Kinsta ensures a smooth transition for you from other hosting providers. Customers have reported 200% faster load times post-migration to their platform. What I find cool about Kinsta is their fast and reliable customer service and premium features that are included at no extra cost. Ready to experience Kinsta's hosting for yourself? Get your first month free when you sign up at kinsta.com today. That's KINSTA.com. Hello, listeners. We have a treat for today's episode. On the show, I'll be interviewing Joe, the CEO and co-founder of Pulumi, to get an update on all that has gone on within the company in the past year. As a reminder, Pulumi is infrastructure as code technology that allows you as an engineer, developer, architect to deliver infrastructure with high velocity and scale through software engineering. You can learn more about their product and get started quick at pulumi.com. That's PULUMI.com. Well, today I have a special guest on the Code Story podcast, Joe Duffy, founder and CEO of Pulumi. Last year had Luke Hoban on the show to talk about Pulumi, and now we're going to get the update on the company, on the product, and what has happened within the last year. Joe, thank you for being on the show today.
Hey, no, it's great to be here. Thank you.
Before we jump into the changes, give my audience a bit of an overview about you.
Yeah, my love of programming and computers dates back to pretty early on in my life. I fell in love with programming when I was a sort of an early teenager, largely because of an interest in gaming, which I know is a common story. That's sort of still my hobby to this day. Is just, I love to code. I love to just tinker with computers. But yeah, I spent a lot of time at Microsoft. 14 years or thereabouts in a lot of cool positions, from developer to running the entire, languages organization with compilers and C++ and C# and .NET before leaving to found Pulumi. And I left there about 6 years ago and have been running Pulumi ever since.
So, okay, I got to dig into some of this. I love the correlation between music and technology. I love talking to founders or developers or people, architects, people that are in the space, and I think it's fascinating to see how many people are musicians. Do you see that correlation too?
Absolutely. It's actually been remarkable how strong a correlation there seems to be, and it's not surprising. I'm really into not just playing music, but also the theory behind music with music theory. And I spent a lot of time with, mathematics in terms of working on type systems for programming languages. And there's a lot of symbolic manipulation that goes into both. And whether we consciously think about it that way or not, there's definitely seemingly a strong correlation.
Okay, I'm a guitar player myself. I have a set of axes at home that I jam on regularly. What is your favorite guitar?
I love my Strat. It's not an original 67. It's sort of the reissue that they did a couple of years ago, I think it was. But I also have a Joe Satriani Ibanez, which is fun to play on. I have to admit, I don't play nearly as much anymore, so these things can be kind of intimidating to pick up and play. But I actually have a blister on my finger from playing all day yesterday. So,
well, good stuff. Well, let's dive into Pulumi then. And before we jump into, what is new over the past year since I've talked to Luke, what has happened with the company and the product, tell my audience a refresher of what Pulumi is.
So Pulumi is infrastructure as code technology that allows you to effectively manage cloud resources in your favorite language across any cloud. Public, private, hybrid, many clouds, Azure, Google Cloud, of course, AWS. And really by tapping into decades of great programming languages that we've built up with JavaScript and Python and Go, you can really build amazing software using infrastructure as building blocks. We think of these advanced use cases and a lot of our customers are building their own cloud systems using Pulumi to program and stitch together those building blocks. So that's kind of where we started. Pulumi is a company, a product, and an open source technology all at once. And so, we've got a lot of exciting things in the future beyond that, but infrastructure as code is where it's at today.
So what has been going on with Pulumi over the last year? I'm sure there's some big things that you have to tell me. Let's jump right into those.
Yeah, I think the first thing is we've just seen incredible adoption. I think in the last year, we've definitely hit sort of a tipping point in terms of, community awareness. Number of customers is now up over 1,500 paying customers, which is incredible. Some of the best companies out there today building incredible products for their customers like Snowflake and Atlassian. And so we've seen just that continued momentum, and really we're here to serve the community. So we've been really iterating on making it easier to get up and running in the cloud, to enforce best practices, and have a lot less toil and boilerplate, and really be able to focus on your business logic. We had a major launch back in October this year. We call it Pulumi Deployments. And that's just a radically easier way to go from having some code that you want running in the cloud to actually having it running. You can really just commit code to a Git repo and then let Pulumi just run with it from there. It's actually built on this foundation that we call the Automation API, which has been one of the best kept secrets that Pulumi has to date. We don't really do a great job marketing it, but all of our customers seem to find it. So over 80% of our enterprise customers use this. An Automation API turns infrastructure as code on its head. It basically says, what if infrastructure as code was a library instead of being a command line? You could embed that library into a larger system. You could build your own custom SaaS product on it. You could build your own custom portals, custom tools. And we've just seen incredible things being built by the community and our customers using Automation API. And that's actually what underpins Pulumi deployments. So really taking a big step forward in terms of realizing the long-term vision of the company.
So I'm intrigued by Pulumi deployment. So you want to have code running in the cloud, and this is a bridge to get it running in the cloud. Walk me through that process. So I've got some code, I want to commit it. Normally I got to do, step X, Y, Z to actually get it up and running. How does that work if I'm using Pulumi deployments?
A lot of people go through this maturity life cycle of, hey, I'm just going to deploy some code from the command line, and I'm going to do it manually. And anytime I want to make an update or deploy a new version, I go rerun a command line. That's how most infrastructure as code tools start. But typically, you don't want to be running things manually. Anytime it's a manual process, there's a chance for a human to get it wrong. You then have to think about, hey, how do I manage access controls and distribute security and tokens and keys? And so a lot of people will move towards a CI/CD, continuous integration pipeline approach at some point. And I'm glad that we took this approach with Pulumi. We actually said in the early days, we're going to meet you where you are. So if you're using GitHub Actions or GitLab Pipelines or Spinnaker or pick any of these over 12 systems that we support, we're going to meet you where you are and just help you add infrastructure delivery to your pipeline. Most of our customers have sort of figured out how to deliver application code. They're really just trying to figure out, how do I now deliver my infrastructure as code? Which is great, but there's a lot of configuration steps that are opportunities to get things wrong. And because we can be more opinionated with Pulumi deployments, we effectively say, just point us at your Git repo and we'll take care of all the heavy lifting. It's literally 2 clicks of a button to set this thing up. Might actually be 1. And then from there, we have a new workflow technology we built on the back end that can actually host all the compute that orchestrates the deployments on your behalf. And why that's really exciting is, hey, now it's just ridiculously easy to get that code deployed. But 2, it actually gives Pulumi more of this workflow foundation where now we can go do other things. So we can do things like automatic drift detection and remediation. We can schedule workloads on your behalf. So it's really kind of step 1 of many.
You caught my attention with the phrase you said, meet you where you're at. So what sort of key integrations did you have to put in place? I mean, I assume that's a big or a key cornerstone element of Pulumi, either, developer integrations or infrastructure integrations, all the things. How did you decide where to meet them where they were?
It was a very strategic decision we made. Because, a lot of platforms are more monolithic out there. They'll take an approach of, maybe you need to go adopt 100% of that platform and get rid of some of your existing tools. And we really did want to meet people where they are, just because it eases adoption. It makes it more incremental. But you're right. I mean, picking which integrations to support was tough. We sort of had a rule in the early days that unless a customer was asking us for this integration so they could use it in a production setting, like an actual use case, we wouldn't go preemptively add the integration. So we were very customer driven in how we decided those things. But it goes all the way from which languages do we support, which cloud providers do we support. So we have 7 languages now and over 100 cloud providers. Which identity systems do we support? G Suite, Active Directory, and then the CI/CD integrations I just mentioned. So all told, we have something on the order of 150 product integrations. But again, it's all been anchored in what customers are asking us for.
So I'm always interested in, the balance between open source and then sort of paid product, right? So if I want to go get started with Pulumi, I assume I can jump in and git pull an open source repo and start using it. Is that primarily how you bring your customers in, is through that process? Or tell me a little bit about the balance between those two things.
It is actually how most people find us. Almost all people find us through the open source. And it's really fantastic because it aligns our company's interests. We can really just go build a happy open source ecosystem. And as we do that, the business opportunity naturally emerges. We don't have to do unnatural things or have two things at odds with one another, which I know, some companies struggle with. The analogy I draw sometimes is just like you can use Git offline and host your own Git repos and Git is fully open source. It's so much easier to use that in a team setting when you pair it with GitHub or GitLab. Pulumi really has that. We don't call it Pulumi Hub. Sometimes we joke about should we rename our commercial edition to Pulumi Hub, but you can use our open source entirely offline if you want. That really is fully open source. It's Apache license. It's very permissive, but it's just so much easier in a team setting, collaboration, security, reliability, all the features people need at scale. It's so much easier to just use that with our SaaS product. It's also free for individuals, and we have a generous free tier for teams. 2/3 of our open source users elect to use that open source paired with the Pulumi service, the Pulumi SaaS. So it's a very natural synergy between the two.
Okay, so I'm an engineer and I don't have infrastructure as code. I don't use a product like that, and it's kind of a new idea to me. How do I get started with Pulumi? I hear you saying go to the open source side, but what would help me? What would propel me to move faster with all of these great tools that you've created?
One other thing that we did in the last year was we launched this new technology called Pulumi templates. What a Pulumi template is, it used to be the case when you got started, you would say, create a new project. You would pick your language, let's say Python, you pick your cloud, let's say AWS, and it would generate some basic scaffolding, but you're kind of starting with a blank page. And we know in programming and writing and lots of things, like staring at a blank page can be daunting. And so we launched this thing, Pulumi templates, where we took effectively what we thought were the 80% use case. We hear all the time from people, hey, I want this particular architecture on this particular cloud. And we basically shipped something like 25, 30 new getting started templates. So now it's not just language and cloud, it's also cloud architecture. So, hey, I want Python AWS microservice, Python AWS static website, Kubernetes cluster, a lot of the different common use cases across AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, and Kubernetes. And so that's really an easy way to get up and running. We've also shipped a ton new examples and reference architectures that people can use as well. But that's part of now the getting started flow. So if you go to Pulumi and say get started, you'll see that button everywhere. It will walk you through a flow that's updated that is centered all around those templates.
Okay, so Joe, what is next? What's next for Pulumi? Obviously Pulumi deployments is massive. That's a huge win for the product. It's a huge win for the community. But what is next? What does the future look like for Pulumi?
Yeah, so we're still just getting started. We're still early on. Although the community has grown quite a bit, we know we're still early in terms of market share adoption of Pulumi's infrastructure as code technology. We think of that as our flagship technology. So that's priority number one, is just really continue to listen to the community, listening to our customers, making it as easy as possible to do infrastructure as code. From there, there's really two other primary directions. One is making the cloud a lot more accessible to developers and engineers. Despite that template example I just gave you, and I think you'll find it's probably the easiest getting started experience you'll ever have with infrastructure as code. You'll be up and running in 5 minutes. From there, customizing it, the level of abstraction that the cloud providers operate at today is super low level. I think of, hey, if Pulumi gave you the C++ so that we don't have to focus on assembly language anymore, like a lot of infrastructure as code today is a lot of YAML. I think of that as assembly language. Well, we've given you a higher level language, but we're still pretty far from what is the Node.js of the cloud. What is that thing that just allows you to be hyper productive building distributed applications? That's one area that we've had a number of incubation efforts internally. We've never quite gotten it right, so we've never shipped it. But we think 2023 is the year that we're going to tackle that. And then from there, growing into the vision of the company, our mission is to democratize the cloud. That means make it as easy as possible for every practitioner to get the most out of the cloud. And we see a lot of adjacent problems around security with secrets management and policies, infrastructure management. I mentioned drift detection, a lot of workflow challenges as well. So really moving in the direction of not just infrastructure as code, but really an infrastructure platform for the entire team. And so really focusing on these three things in parallel.
Breezing through your case studies, you've obviously, had some major successes in introducing Pulumi to some big names. I see Panther on there. I had Jack Naglieri on the show earlier this year. But I'm curious, is there one case study or one story that you would really like the world to know about that Pulumi went in and saved the day or made a massive impact on a company?
Yeah, I love the Snowflake use case because it's been just an amazing success. Snowflake is a cutting edge cloud innovator. So that story is kind of an interesting one. They had a lot of experience with other infrastructure as code tools. They sort of had a top-down directive for what they called the data cloud, which was a key part of their IPO story. You look at how much of the IPO story hinged on the data cloud. Well, that was really a new effort they'd begun a year and a half before the IPO. And they had really ambitious deadlines. And they knew from working with other infrastructure as code tools, they weren't going to be able to get there with those tools. But with Pulumi, they could actually just give their developers and their infrastructure platform team the ability to do infrastructure as code in language they were already using for the rest of the Snowflake system, which was Go. And so they made a big bet on Pulumi. Like Pulumi was essential to them hitting that IPO deadline set by the board. And they went all in and they actually exceeded their estimates in terms of what they could get done. So great win for them. They made their managers happy. They made the board happy. They hit the deadlines for the IPO, but since then they've really bet even bigger on Pulumi and using it in other systems. And I think that's a good case study because a lot of folks have investments in infrastructure as code. So picking what is that really business impactful beachhead to start from is usually what we work with customers on. And then we win that one. And then we go and say, okay, now let's get all the other infrastructure as code over to Pulumi. But that was just a clear case study of like tons of business value. And the developers love it. So it's a win all around.
Okay, so infrastructure as code is becoming a thing, right? And Pulumi obviously offers a wonderful suite of tools. Who are your major competitors? Who's out there trying to do this as well and perhaps doing it in a different way? Or tell me a little bit about that.
There's a few eras of infrastructure as code. I'll say, back 15 years ago or thereabouts, the Chef Puppet and then Ansible and Salt Stack really emerged in the world of virtual machines. So we still encounter those tools. In fact, we integrate with them if you need to do on VM configuration. The real ones we run into sort of the second era, which is more provisioning based versus configuration, which is where you see like CloudFormation and then shortly thereafter, Terraform. Those are very, very common, especially, they got a head start on us by, 4 or 5 years. CloudFormation uses YAML or JSON. That really, you hit the limits on scalability and complexity very quickly. For that reason, they added sort of a templating language embedded within YAML and JSON. HashiCorp took a different approach with Terraform. They created a domain-specific language, DSL, that again is pretty limited, but it gives you guardrails so that the simple things are simple. The problem is the complex things get super complicated. And so they've had to, for loops and conditionals and things like that over time. We tackle that problem by saying, hey, bring your favorite language, and then we'll marry that with declarative infrastructure as code, still provisioning based. So still very much in the same vein of a Terraform, where you get that great expressiveness. I'll say since then, very flattered. I think one of the things I'm proudest about is I think Pulumi really did sort of shake up the industry a little bit in terms of how infrastructure as code is done. And so since then, you see the Cloud Development Kit, CDK, coming out of AWS. you see that being applied to different areas. So even HashiCorp has taken that and kind of bolted it on top of Terraform for some users. Completely separate from that, we see things like Crossplane and Qlang, which is great for kind of taming the chaos of configuration management. There's a lot of new technologies, but TLDR, I think like Terraform really is where we see most of the market today.
That makes sense. And it makes sense how you're approaching it too. And it really aligns with meeting the developers, meeting the engineers where they are and saying, okay, you pick the language and then you integrate, infrastructure as code within the place where you are. So that makes sense with your strategy.
Another interesting integration that we chose was you can actually deploy some of these competitive technologies using Pulumi. So if you want to standardize on Pulumi as the delivery workflow, and you've still got some Terraform in the mix or some CloudFormation in the mix, we have integrations to make that incremental adoption easier. Again, knowing that you can't boil the ocean on day one, and we want to meet people where they are.
I've always find it interesting when in the open source world, when there's a popular repo, popular tool out there that's being used. How has that affected your recruiting for Pulumi? Has it brought in basically the world's elite and contributing to the open source project and then them joining your team? Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say probably half of the people on the team wouldn't be here if Pulumi wasn't open source, either because they began engaging with Pulumi through the community. In fact, some of our best hires have been folks who worked in the community as leaders, sort of organic leaders that just emerged because they love what we're doing. But also I hear a lot from folks like, hey, I want to work in the open. I want to work on an open source technology. And that's really important to a lot of folks. And so, no joke, probably 50% of the engineers on the team wouldn't want to work here if we weren't built on top of open source.
Well, Joe, it's been wonderful having you on the show. It's great to get an update on Pulumi. If I'm someone in my audience and I want to learn more, I want to get the inside scoop, I want to get started right away, where do I go?
Pulumi.com is your one-stop shopping. It's all about practitioner, how to get up and running. So you click any of the big get started buttons that will take you through downloading the open source, walk you through spinning up some infrastructure, walk you through some of those templates that I talked about earlier. And then if at any point you want help, adopting this within your team, we've got a community Slack, lots of people there, thousands of people hang out there, including the whole team. And then if you find a contact us button, we're always happy to hop on a call, talk through your use case, how best to adopt it within your team.
Well, Joe, thank you for being on the show today and giving the update on Pulumi. Really excited about deployments and all of the great things you're doing over there at the company. Really appreciate you being on the show today.
Thanks, Noah. It's been great.
There you have it. Pulumi is simplifying infrastructure as code and meeting you as a developer where you are by providing support for using their product with the language of your choice. Combined with their templates and deployments technology, they are pushing the envelope to help you spin up what you need when you need it, and fast. As mentioned at the top of the show, you can learn more about the product and get started right away by visiting Pulumi.com. That's Pulumi.com. And thanks again for listening.
Taxes was feeling so stuck. Sitting in traffic, squeezing into a parking spot, all to squeeze in getting tax help during your lunch break. Now Taxes is a TurboTax expert who does your taxes for you, while you go about your day getting real-time notifications about their progress and the most money back guaranteed. Now this is Taxes. Intuit TurboTax. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live Full Service, real-time updates only in iOS mobile apps. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees.